Hello everyone, long time no see. So I was traveling and I was making videos in Japan for a while, and I had a long period where I was too busy to make the regular content that I used to make. And then life happened and I got into the flow of doing lots of different things that weren't really related to the YouTube world that I built up. And now I've kind of come in full circle, where as I've learned new things and figured out things, and as I ask myself, what does the world need, as I find new answers, I decided to come back and just make more videos. One of the things I did before was I made videos that took so long to make, in terms of scripting them and researching them and kind of conglomerating a load of information and collecting information about sort of nutrition and vegan facts and extra links and things for people. I was trying to make these nice resources that would help people. And the editing and all the music and things, it took so long that it just became an unsustainable thing, so I kind of gave up on it. And I always felt like, I'd like to get back to that YouTube world, but maybe someday when I have some free time and I feel like I have a message to share. So when I first went vegan, which is about 10 years ago, it was a different world than it was now, and I saw a lot of confusion. I saw a world where people were making a lot of mistakes and feeling very guilty about it. Things like looking at labels and not seeing the ingredients properly, because the vegan labels weren't necessarily there. And then after buying something that wasn't vegan, you'd see people, including myself, just feel really bad that, I should have been better. Or when you see someone and they ask you about veganism and you don't know something, they ask you, hey, well, what happens in this industry or something? And I thought, I don't know really. And you can either try and make something up or sort of cobble together some vague, like, they abuse the animals and it's all horrible. Or you can just be honest and say, I don't really know enough, I need to look up more. Which kind of ends the conversation in terms of trying to convince them that you're right and that veganism's the best. But as I've gone into collecting information and sharing it, and being a sort of master of the facts and the stats and the statistical sort of world, I've come back to the place where it just becomes more of a feeling thing, where veganism doesn't need science and it doesn't need evidence really. It's just more of a principle of love, of if we could make a world that was more loving and more kind and compassionate, what would that world look like? And the answer to that is veganism. And that's the thing I love about it, because it was always this thing that was beyond just a sort of diet or even an animal rights thing. It was beyond that. It was about choosing consciously choosing what you believe is right and informing yourself to the best of your ability, and then taking that ideal and saying, in the practical sense, because everyone wants to change the world and everyone wants to do something, but in the practical, most simplest way, how can I integrate an action day by day that aligns with that vision for a better world? What if the world could be more compassionate, more loving, with more freedom and more sovereignty? What would it look like? And what would we do? And veganism is that. And some people probably forget that when they get kind of caught up in the world of trying to explain veganism, especially scientifically, or trying to explain it from a point of view of why it's good and the benefits and the how to do it and all that. It's nice to just bring it back to that core place of, it just feels like the right thing to do, this kind of thing. And yeah, that's why I was so passionate. So one of the things I found when I first went vegan was that there was a lack of clarity in how to do it and how to live and how to sustain these kind of actions. It wasn't that clear and it wasn't necessarily simple. And even though the internet was full of information, it wasn't very well organized. And there were people sharing little nuggets of each kind of aspect. And so the thing that I saw as being valuable was this idea of sort of synthesis, of like collecting all the information together, kind of like revision notes for sort of like an exam, where you take all of the best bits of everything and you condense it into a form that's easily understandable, engaging, simple, and not complicated and not overwhelming. And you just take it into what are the 6 steps, or what are the simplest things you can do. What is it that you need to prepare before you make sort of big changes? What's the preparation necessary? And I made the videos that didn't really exist that much. And I found that place of connecting with a lot of young people, especially people who needed that sort of support and that advice. And I had a period where I sent a lot of emails and had a lot of sort of Skype calls and exchanges, which eventually became kind of impractical because there was lots of people who watched the videos and everyone. It ends up being a lot of maintaining too many conversations, which is you end up letting everyone down rather than being able to actually support people. So I asked myself, what does the world need at this time to help everything be more loving and more kind and more peaceful? And the videos I did before were appropriate at that time, but now veganism is growing so beautifully. One of the reasons why I spent a lot of time in Japan was to go back to that place where people didn't necessarily know how to go vegan or what veganism is or why it's important. And it took me back to that sort of nostalgic place of the sort of the humble roots of this kind of grassroots movement. And now, because everything's so convenient and simple, especially in places like England, in the Western world, it's much easier and it's become more sort of affordable and accessible, and more popular and sort of trendy in a lot of ways. Obviously, it's going into the mainstream, so the kind of character building things that you can go through when something's difficult. Going vegan isn't necessarily an opportunity to do that anymore, because there's so many people who really just accept you as you are, as the vegan things become more socially acceptable and more trendy. But in a world where everyone has all the information they need, everything's very easy, there's lots of junk foods and everything's just very convenient. What is it that the vegan world needs? What is it that the world in general needs? And as I ask myself this, I think it's peace, and it's more self-love, more self-kindness. Because compassion and kindness needs to work both ways, where you need to give to yourself what you're trying to give to others. It's like the idea of you're on an aeroplane and they say you put your oxygen mask on first. Keep yourself safe before you try and rescue everyone else. And it's being able to fill your own cup full of water so that your cup is overflowing, and out of that overflowing you then can help, rather than having a sort of half empty cup and constantly giving it away until you feel like you're running on empty. And so a lot of the vegan world and the activism world has been sort of founded on a lot of sacrifice, a lot of frustration and anger. The idea that there are bad people doing bad things and we need to stop them. But one of the things, as I've studied more spiritual texts and looked at the sort of forgiveness practice that a lot of teachings point to, you get to a place where you say, the ones who are doing those things, they're also doing it to themselves, and those who cause the suffering are suffering. And everyone makes mistakes in lots of different ways. And so the ones who are making these kinds of mistakes, that are choosing less than ideal choices, that have consequences that are less than ideal, you need to have a compassion for that inability to see. Because if people really could see, and they could feel what, say, I can feel, where when you've experienced the animals and you feel how they feel as they're going through that journey, you realize that people just don't have that capacity to see that. And when they can, and the thing opens up their ability to see, the lens of their perception, as it opens up and they see things from a bigger picture, the shift away into a more compassionate action is inevitable. So one of the things I thought, it's not about forcing people to do something that they're not ready to do, that they don't want to do. It's about slowly, with the sort of the actions of love and compassion and forgiveness, to pull people away from the illusions and delusions and the propaganda and the programming that's preventing them from being able to see things as clearly as we can see them. So if I was thinking of myself as 10 years ago as I was going vegan, I remember there was, because I've been vegetarian before that, so it wasn't a big change, whereas the vegetarian thing was probably more of a change, because it's a big, especially to parents and to family, it's a big challenge navigating that sort of space. But if I was going to say to myself, here's my advice, here's what you can do, I'd want to say, don't worry, especially at the beginning, about being too perfect in all the different ways, because there's obviously you want to avoid the animal products, which is the fundamental point of generally how people start. But then there's trying to be sustainable with things, so it's like saying, oh, can I be plastic free, and can I have eco things, and everything, all of a sudden all my things I have to throw them away, and suddenly it can get very overwhelming for people when they really consider the big picture of the implication of what the vegan choice and the choices of trying to be more loving and compassionate, what that can lead to. And if you're looking at that big place and you try and do your best at that big vision of saying, well, now I'm going to be zero waste and organic and what was the other things, being nutritious and having all your balanced nutrition and having all your supplements, and all of a sudden, other vegans seem to be all cycling and weightlifting, and maybe I should do that too. And you end up getting very caught up in the form of it rather than just the essence of today, what's the most compassionate, kind choice I can make whilst aligning with this vegan thing. And I think taking a step away from the perfectionism, which stresses you out, and just moving into a sort of a lightness and a giggle, and seeing it as a joyous experience. It's a curious kind of adventure where you get to sort of discover things about yourself. You go, for some reason I care a lot about what people think about me. For some reason there's this part of me that feels scared to tell my friend that I don't want milk, and I would rather lie or kind of awkwardly drink the thing than actually just say, hey, no, I'm vegan now. For some reason the word vegan and the concept of me being different and not complying with this sort of culturally normalized practice, for some reason I'm more pulled to conform. And you go, well, that's interesting. And isn't that an evolutionary step that we can all take when we say, this is, I mean, I'm going to come up against a lot. Most people have already, obviously, if you've been vegan for a while. If people have followed this channel, they're probably vegan by now, but who knows? It's when you see the journey as a joyous, growing adventure, an opportunity, your whole world becomes like you're a child and like you're just figuring things out and learning, and you don't put the pressure on yourself to know everything, because you're finding out new things, you're learning new information, and gently and steadily you're integrating it into your life. And as I've studied more of books and things I've read about, there's this idea of Kaizen, this Japanese concept of rather than it being about big steps to change your life, you know, vegan overnight concepts. It's about saying, what's the smallest, most simplest, trivial step that I can do to improve in a certain area, to bring more love or to bring more joy into something. And it's saying, well, if you try and do something big leaps can lead to the big falls, and you can end up, I mean, we've seen in the vegan community, some people make these big steps, and it's kind of in a way for the wrong reasons, and they jump on this big bandwagon and it ends up kind of falling apart and crashing. And I mean, many people do these things. They have these kind of fad lifestyle patterns, and the challenge is that everyone's lives and everyone's mistakes have been so publicized now through the social media platforms that the more we see of these mistakes, the more we make a big deal about it, rather than just saying, oh, there's another person who's made a mistake and they're going to figure something out, and they might even be back in a year or something. But when it becomes a big dramatic statement on the internet, it's like, now the world knows I've quit veganism. If there's a shame of saying, actually, I kind of did feel better, or I actually would like to align with this. And there's a lot of people who have probably gone through that cycle where they kind of give up on things because they were in that whole experience for maybe more diet related reasons rather than ethical, love, compassion kind of reasons. So the whole thing crashes down on them when they realise that veganism isn't giving them the thing that they wanted. Because most things that you chase, if you think they'll make you feel a certain way, eventually they very deeply and profoundly disappoint you. And you find yourself angry at the thing, and maybe the people who got you into the thing. Because you're like, oh, they promised me the world. I saw some vegan person who looked happy, rich and beautiful, and I thought that me too, I could also become happy, rich and beautiful if I just did this thing that they were saying, eat plants. But veganism won't necessarily make you, rich, beautiful and whatever else that people think will bring them happiness. But it's a state that you can cultivate through the journey of veganism, and it's that journey. This is the idea of the Kaizen thing that I'm talking about. That's the you take the small steps, and it might just be as simple as like the idea of the Meatless Mondays thing. If people are really just completely new to it, it's saying, like, what one meal can I put into my life that's going to make me feel like I'm moving close to this vegan lifestyle and making it sustainable? Because if you say add one extra meal per week over the span of a few weeks, and you make it so that every meal that you choose and you integrate into your life is something that you love and you enjoy and that you're proud to have, and you're sharing it with your friends and you're doing it in a sort of sustainable way, before you know it, every meal is vegan, and every meal you have you love, rather than suddenly being vegan and then suddenly feeling overwhelmed when you just end up eating peanut butter sandwiches and not knowing what to do. And that's what I did. And because I had such a core grounding, and I know this is my purpose in life, there's this feeling of this kind of message is something that I would never give up on, and it would never have any of the obstacles, I would just pass through them rather than backing down. But I know as soon as the fear and the guilt and the confusion and the mistakes come up, those who aren't necessarily so pulled, or they've only just been sort of kind of lured into the vegan world, they can face an obstacle, whether it's after a year or so, they face a big obstacle that comes through in their life, which isn't really to do with the vegan thing, but it's been brought up to them into their awareness through the vegan journey that they're going through. So they blame veganism, they blame vegans, and it becomes this big drama. But ultimately, whatever journey you take, whether you end up traveling, or if you have a particular career, or you end up studying certain things, learning languages and doing all these things, the lessons you need to, be your best self and to be happy and joyful, they're going to keep coming to you until you're ready to just sort of surrender to love. Surrender to love. So yeah, veganism is love, and it's compassion to all. And the thing for me that makes veganism so important is there's a kind of an energetic consequence to the idea of paying someone to do something that's harmful. Because as much as in the kind of narrow-minded, sort of superficial society where everything's very very surface level, people aren't really thinking of the deeper consequences of the choices that you have and the sort of boomerang effects they have. And the money has a particular power, in a sense, where if you're using your financial power to vote for the idea of the slavery and the abuse and the torture and the the murder and all of these things that come along with that industry, you're really kind of saying to the world and to the universe and to yourself in sort of every dimension of everything that I agree and I align with pain and suffering and death and these dark energies that are very toxic. When you're doing something like that to others, you're then in a state where you're magnetizing in a sense. When people get into the sort of law of attraction-y sort of stuff, there's a magnetism then that you're creating that's bringing in the same kinds of frequencies, the same kind of energies and things. So if you're paying for slavery and suffering and death, you're going to experience on some level, from whether it's a government or from some kind of partner relationship thing, you're going to experience the same kinds of things because you're going to get what you give. And so veganism, that's the thing that's nice about it, is that when you give compassion and you do your best and you say, I want to not pay for these things, you're then going to align into a lifestyle that has more compassion for you as well. And so that's why the self-love and everything is very relevant, because you got to give it to yourself at the same time as giving it to your fellow humans and the fellow animals and the plants and the minerals and everything. Mother Earth, who's kind enough to grow an abundance of vegetation and allow humans and animals to be here in this big grand experience that we're all having, So one of the things I've been practicing a lot is this idea of forgiveness and acceptance of where people are at. And acceptance doesn't mean that you agree with the choices people are making necessarily, but you just understand that that's where they're at. And that you can't, in a world where we have free will and we have this sort of ability to choose, and we're going to experience the consequences of our actions on some level. It's not really your job to force people, as much as you like to. It's not really your job to force people. Whereas if you accept them and you have compassion and you eliminate the separation aspect of me and them and us and them and I'm better than you and you're bad and I'm good sort of thing, the sort of polarity duality thing, if you let go of that, you come to this place where you go, we're both really the same. We're both fellow human beings having this experience of crazy human life, and we're both making different kinds of choices, but both of us have and will make lots of mistakes in different forms and different ways. You can really benefit from just having a lot of gratitude to say, well, I'm very blessed and I'm very grateful that I know what I know, because without being mean, the lifestyle that isn't aligned with health and love and compassion doesn't feel as good. There's this ability to override things with kind of this hedonistic, like, oh, I feel good by eating meat, but really these things are very empty, and they never really will satisfy people. Just like sort of the idea of drugs and alcohols and junk foods and things, you will experience relief, but it's not the real peace, it's not the real joy, it's not the real happiness. When you're eating a cake, it's this fleeting feeling, or if you're eating bacon or something, it's this fleeting experience of like, oh, it's nice, but it's gone, and then it's like, oh, I need more and more, and then you're always chasing and chasing. But when you get to this space of, oh, I love myself and I love the world, and I'm choosing love for my fellow creatures and the fellow humans, and I'm doing my best to bring more of that joy and love and peace to the world, you go, I actually feel kind of good, and it's not going to end. This peace is just, it's something that's real. Whereas sort of bacon taste isn't really that real. It's kind of a fleeting sensory experience that just constantly runs out and leaves you sort of hanging. So yeah, forgiveness helps us communicate, because we see people for who they are, and they are actually just animals, just as you forgive the lions that don't necessarily know better in that sort of evolved way. They've not evolved into a space where they are able to digest plant-based products. Lions have a tendency to do things that are more violent. You say, well, maybe one day the lions might evolve into a space where they become more compassionate. Who knows? And you say, just like a child who's learning to walk, they fall down and they get back up, and you fall down, and you just say bless them, because even if it takes them a few years to be able to figure out how to walk, everyone's been in that space where they're trying to make loving choices and they can't, and they keep getting pulled back to the more negative stuff, or the sort of more unevolved, the less evolved stuff. And the judging of them doesn't help us really, because it doesn't make us feel good. And I remember a lot of the speeches as well, but a lot of the marches and events and things I went to, like activism events, back in the activism days, when everything was very grassroots and there was less social media stuff. There was these shame on you phrases that got chanted quite a lot, and I know a lot of other people have the same experience, but when I hear this shame on you thing, I think this isn't a vegan message, it's just anger. And the anger's justified. It's very, you're very entitled to, everyone's very entitled to feel that, because these things are, how do you say it, an abomination. They're really, as low as it gets, these actions, and when you get into looking at the fur industry and the dairy industry and the egg industry, and they're all about the same in terms of, you can't really go, this one's better than the other, because it's all horrible. Especially the beings who are at such a lower level that they can't really, that the cognitive kind of dissonance is so strong and it's so disconnected that there isn't this feeling of, this is wrong. And you have to think, well, it's not shame on them. It's like, whoa, I really hope that there's some way I can help them. There was this, the animal save movement. They say when a being, I don't remember the full quote, when a being, when you see a being suffering, and when a being causes you to feel pain, don't run away from the being that's in pain and that causes you to feel that sort of feeling, but come closer and try and help. Don't run away from it, come closer. And in that closeness and that listening and that acceptance and letting go of the judgments and moving into more of just listening, you end up seeing a part of yourself in these people. It's one of the things I found, is that all the anger and frustration I had towards the non-vegan stuff was just that guilt that I felt about the choices I made. And it's sort of different a little bit with me, because I generally made the choice to be vegetarian as young as I sort of could in the practical sense. I didn't really know about the concept until I was about 10, and it wasn't really a practical thing before that. But as soon as I kind of found out about it, I aligned with it completely, and it was really about as quick as you could go into it all, especially in a family where when one of your parents is a the killing floor manager. That's my history. So lots of resistance in the family, but regardless of that, it's that, like, we have free will, so I'm not going to eat the meat. It doesn't go in. Can't go in the mouth. It doesn't work. There was a point of that where when they tried, but it you just throw up kind of thing, and because it's like, this is a dead animal. No, it's no longer considered food in my life, in my world. And when you make that choice so firmly, even very strict parents and things can't really get you. When you're 100% no, there's a power in that alignment with no, which is kind of beautiful. But I think people who went into that adult years and the long term of doing the sort of mindless meat life, a mindless meat life, and there ends up being a lot of guilt and frustration where you see, once you become vegan, you see all the aspects of yourself that was just ignorant and didn't think about it, and you realize a lot of these excuses that you hear, they're actually your own excuses, just from a different form and a different person, and it's just been kind of projected out. And it's your opportunity to just say, actually, I forgive myself for that. I was kind of stupid, but bless me, I just didn't know. And the thing you got to remember is the programming and the influence that the propaganda channels, the programs and the television boxes and the social medias and things, the power that they've had over people, the amount of power that's been given to them as an authority figure that people have integrated in, and advertisement goes so deep into people's subconscious in a way where it's like every 15 minutes you get a new download of information. You're in a relaxed state, it's going right into your subconscious, you're integrating all that, and that just becomes your blueprint and your map for what the world is to you, so you're creating your own world. And people's minds have been hacked. It's pretty freaky. The minds have been hacked, and beings who would otherwise choose love, and they would choose compassion, and they wouldn't want to align with these, because when you see children, you often see children loving animals and joyous, and it takes so much programming and so much hacking of this sort of beautiful loving mind to get people to the point where they can pay for slavery, they can pay for these kind of horrible things. And for me, my heart really kind of just goes wide and wide and wider and wider until I see everyone as really very capable of these loving choices, but just full of many distortions. So this is where we're at now. I want to come along and help, share the voice. So, there's a lot of phases of veganism that comes, where there's phases of experimenting with different sort of dietary patterns, and there's periods of deep sort of introspection, and it's the facing your own inner place and seeing, like, oh, where am I at in relation to the world, and some of the things that you put off. Sometimes it's like sort of relatives that you've never confronted about things. It's suddenly you get an opportunity to deal with those things, and sometimes it's actually going, I'm in an environment where no one really understands me or listens to me, and you can try and be kind of kind and compassionate and shine the light and be nice, but sometimes you have a point where you say, actually, I've shone my light, and the light has come, and but no one was ready to look at it, so they the seeds have been planted, and now it's time for me to shine this light in another place. There are other areas that need the light. So sometimes it's compassionate just to say, actually, why have I always just stuck around with this environment that's particularly toxic and doesn't align with where I'm at? There's no resonance anymore, where actually we're just sort of we're doing obligation stuff like, oh, hello, please, and thank yous, and here's your here's your birthday presents or something. So yeah, I mean, the phases of veganism are fun, where you get the radical phase where you're sort of frustrated at everything, and then there's the acceptance periods where you go, actually, in my anger, I'm mildly useless. I just end up promoting more anger, and that's fun for a while, I guess. And then there's the peaceful places where you go, actually, here we are, and then it's kind of integrating into the world, where one of my main things is realizing that my life doesn't have to be 100% vegan. It's generally more effective in the sort of activism sense and in the loving sense to just be with people. As I've travelled, I find I'm just being with people. And in my beingness, obviously, there's that shininess, and you open people's hearts. And when you open people's hearts, they're very open to everything. You can plant very beautiful seeds when you actually touch people in that deep, sincere place. And the thing I always asked people when I was travelling, when I was in Japan and Korea and sort of anywhere really, it was what was it like? What brings you most happiness? Like, what's the thing that makes you smile the most? What's your happiness? In every kind of language that I could figure out, and when people are asked that question, it's such a nice feeling, especially when you're actually there and you're ready to listen, and you find, people have their dreams and their life, and then you hear what their happiness is, and then you hear the other side of it, where it's like, and these are the excuses and the reasons why I'm not really allowed to do that enough, or I wish I could do it more, and I don't feel like I'm entitled to enjoy the joy of myself, of my passions and dreams and things, and my true self. And it's sometimes it's asking that question and going, go for it. And what I found through traveling, through not directly doing vegan activism, but through doing kind of love activism, it's just having compassion for beings, in every way, and trying to step away from the judgment and say, this person has some joy in them and some beautiful something in there, and their heart is, a lot of the time, it's just full of a lot of, it's kind of covered over by a lot of fearful programming, and it's just loosening that programming, like a kind of, like you're scrubbing around, like polishing a mirror. And as you polish the mirror, it becomes clearer and clearer, and then eventually you see yourself within them. And it's very beautiful. So the people whose hearts I've touched as I've travelled, you end up with someone crying, and you feel that thing, and then what happens is, through that love that I've shared, and that gift of, what is important to you, and go for it, there comes a moment where they go, well, what about you? What's your happiness? And I go, I don't know this question, especially if it's in Japanese or Korean. It's like, oh no, happiness. I guess, I do like tofu, and I enjoy the occasional, match of tennis, but, and then, and it always comes back to the, what do I love? And I love teaching, I love sharing, I love collecting information and making it easy for people to understand, like teaching people self-love stuff and gentleness and peaceful stuff, and just sort of chilling everyone out, and showing everyone the lighter side of everything. Because I used to be too serious, everyone's a bit serious about everything, but everything's a bit of a joke, really. And that doesn't undermine the vegan message or the seriousness of, what people are fighting for, but really, the whole thing's a big giggle, isn't it? Everything's hilarious. As you go through life, everything becomes funnier and funnier. And I say, what's my happiness? And it comes down to the vegan message in the end. I go, I just love sharing love, and vegan stuff comes up, and then because I've opened my heart to their heart, there's just this resonance with them that goes, yeah, you go for it, I believe in you, what is veganism? And then they're curious, because rather than just throwing information at people, which a lot of activism has been, It's like going, hey, you there on the street. No, there's a camera now. I'm going to just film you so I can make lots of views on the internet or whatever. And now I'm going to sort of slightly poke fun at you and tell you that you're, make you sound a bit stupid and edit it later so that you sound even more stupid, and then make everyone think that I'm good at educating people. So there's all these kinds of activism methods that have gone in and out of trends. And they're very entertaining, obviously, and there's people do learn quite a lot from it all, but in the end, it's when you're just throwing in, information at people, when you've got that sort of strong agenda, it comes across as a little bit kind of creepy and insincere when you're literally just, I like this because how to turn people vegan. I have these videos, how to convert the vegan, how to convert everyone into our vegan cult. And when you kind of go down that mindset, people get very defensive and they don't open up necessarily. And people will logically agree, because logically, veganism and whatever people say, people get very eloquent about veganism because there's just so much that makes sense about it in every way. But the more people go into it, it's theoretical. Oh yeah, good point. But it's not the heart connection and the opening. So I've always found that the most effective conversations I've had is where I actually take the time to listen to those people's joy and their passion and what it is that sparks them. And then when they're in that open space, then they're open and they're trusting of the information, and then there comes a responsibility with that, where it's not to brainwash and to program people like the adverts do. Vegans often end up playing that role of saying, you gotta go vegan, save the planet, all these sort of chants and mantras, the vegan mantras, and I can save 25,000 grams of grain and one animal's life and all that. It's I get nostalgic thinking about all these things, but really it's just about connecting, isn't it? So yeah, the phases of veganism. I like thinking about it because I've gone through many, and I know I've seen other people go through lots of different ones, and it's very joyful. The longer you go through it, as you kind of develop the wisdom, and one of the nice periods I've had where it's getting back to nature and just connecting with growing food and organic and veganic living, and simplifying things, and kind of coming back to sort of minimalism and harmonious ways of living. And as you do that, you feel this deeper sense of fulfillment, where it's not just a sort of diet change that you go through a holistic transformation of yourself. And really the veganism is just the catalyst, that the vegan concept is the catalyst that teaches you and guides you into how could I live a more happy, fulfilled, sustainable, joyous, loving life. How can I make these more beautiful choices? How can I, how can I do my very best, for the animals and for the humans and for the earth, for myself. So with that little flow of words, that's probably a nice place to end this. I haven't really got a big plan of what kinds of videos I'll make, because the main thing I want to do is make videos that are easy to upload and to make, and are gentle for myself, so that I get into a routine of uploading regularly, so that I'm back into that flow, and then eventually I can kind of integrate more complicated things. And as the creativity comes back, there's all these nice new ideas that come. So yeah, while I was learning Japanese, one of the things I listened to a lot was these kind of like bedtime, I don't know, what do you call it, like bedtime radio, kind of like nighttime, bedtime, listen to someone's voice while you're getting to sleep, like oyasumi radio. It's like that kind of, these little podcasts. So one of the things I realised is actually of the YouTube content that exists, there's all this kind of 3-second buzzy kind of quick, fast paced, quick, hey, and I mean, I know some people have that sort of lowered, artificially lowered attention span where it's the only way that they'll pay attention, sort of thing. But I really like just slow and peaceful and joyful stuff, and that's the thing I liked about these Japanese podcasts and things I was listening to. So I realised that one of my strongest skills and the things I enjoy the most is just letting all the things flow, and that's why I did podcasts for a long time. So this is just an extension of that, but maybe with slightly more structure. Probably not. Who knows? I don't know. I don't have anyone to please anymore. There was a period before where I sort of thought, I have to make my mum proud. No, I don't think that was a thing either. But there was this invisible audience that I felt like I had to impress for some reason that didn't make any real sense. But happens when you're young. You've got all these little things. But now I really don't care. Other than I care about love, and obviously that's why I'm recording this. So hopefully this reached you. I was able to edit it and upload it. Hopefully it reached you in a deeper place. Something resonates. Feel free to leave comments, but I might not read them. Who knows? Probably will. You get curious, don't you? I wonder what people think. Sometimes it's this nostalgic feeling of, oh, I remember you. Oh, you used to comment back 7 years ago. Oh, yeah, thank you. Some little kind of old long-term friends that you kind of make over the YouTube comment section. So, yeah, with that, I'll play us out with some, possibly some music if I decided to add it. It's all very spontaneous. Anyway, take care and have an enjoyable, beautiful afternoon, morning, evening, day, life, whatever, whatever's going on for you. Have a nice life. Bye-bye.